a good friend of mine, Randall Wright, said, you need to publish this. Like, this can actually help people. And he said, like, you're talking about leading leaders. You're talking about helping build the next generation. He's like, what if you can touch somebody? Like, what if you can make an impact? What if what you do actually makes a difference? And so I just went through the process. I hired a writer, Michelle Bender, who's amazing, because my agent, Jan Miller, said something really funny when I was talking to her. She said, "You're a book. This is not a book," which I thought was really, really funny and really humbling. And so she's like, I like what's in there, but we got to get what's in there on here. So it was really funny. So I got real help, which was great. And then the folks at St. Martin's, Tim Bartlett, I think he's the best editor in the world, made sense out of it. And it allowed me in my voice to, again, I told you, I want to make a dent on the world a little bit. And hopefully this does.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com.
Doing creative work can be kind of lonely, and that's why we built the Unmistakable Listener Tribe. The tribe is a community for professionals to connect and support each other. Everything is designed to help you grow your business and share what's working and what isn't. And that's true whether you're a business owner or an artist. You'll get access to feedback, live conversations with guests, and so much more. By joining the tribe, you become part of a community of creators who all support each other, and it's completely free. Hopefully I'll see you there. Visit unmistakablecreative.com/tribe to join. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/tribe. Scott, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Srini, thanks for having me. I appreciate all you're doing to spread the creativity in the world. I'm a listener. I love what you're doing, and let's get at it.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure to have you here. I found out about your work and your book by way of your publicist. And as I was telling you before we hit record, the minute I saw the word CEO of the Philadelphia 76ers, I was like, I don't need to read any more of this description. The answer is absolutely yes. I'm like, let's do this. But before we get into all of that, I want to start by asking what I think is a really relevant question given some of the content in the book. And that is, what religious or spiritual beliefs were you raised with, and how have those impacted your life and your career?
Oh, great question. So I was born and raised a Catholic. And through life, I went to Catholic high school, Our Lady of Lourdes High School in Poughkeepsie, New York, and Villanova, which is an Augustinian Catholic school. And generally not a Christmas Day, Easter Catholic. Like we went to church most Sundays. We had a good spiritual base, in the house, but not overly. And as I look at my family now, splintered. So very, very few of there are 5 of us, I have 4 siblings, 3 brothers and a sister. And, they go sporadically to church and some not at all. We were raised in a house by 2 PhDs. So it was a laboratory for sure. And whether it was faith or sports or education or the way we treated each other, we always had a pretty kind of we had 3 simple rules growing up. Let's put it that way. We had, it was no hurting each other, no hurting your mother, and no girls in the bedroom. So can you imagine, like, as a kid? Now, again, it was a different era. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I was born in 1970, so totally different era. But that was it. No curfew. No have to do your homework. None of that stuff. A really I guess we grew up in a sort of a hippie type household early, and my folks, I was a product of the system. So a food stamp kid when I was really young. Puffed rice and powdered milk, and then my folks did very well successfully. So I went from food stamps to country club, and then back down again. So I think I learned a ton about life and people and connection and interaction. And I have a lot listen. I have 100 stories of my childhood that would be interesting at some longer point. It was a great way to grow up. I absolutely loved it. I had an Irish dad and an Italian mom. And so you got a lot of energy and a lot of passion. But seeing feast to famine and then back to feast and then back to famine was something that I truly appreciate and cherish.
Yeah, I remember reading about that, and I do have questions up, but I want to get to those later. How many siblings do you have?
I have 3 brothers and a sister.
Okay. I was wondering, what did being part of such a big family teach you about human behavior, relationships, and, resolving conflict and communication?
Well, we were, so many lessons. They're my best friends. So we had a very, very, very close childhood. We were all, and still are. They're the ones I call when things go well, and they're the ones I call when I'm crying on my pillow. So we were definitely like born into each other, so to speak. We also, my dad would always say these kind of funny sayings that are sticking in my head right now, but we always competed hard, but he didn't like comparison. He used to say, comparison hurts. Compete. So we competed, but he wanted us to compete with ourselves, not with each other. But we were really athletic growing up. My sister she was an All-American in lacrosse in high school and college. My older brother played tennis at Holy Cross, D1 tennis. And then the rest of us were just kind of high school athletes. We were almost always captains of all the teams we were on. We were typically, most of us, I think all of us were student body presidents. So we're those guys, in high school, and very active. So it was funny. Like as I lean into my children as a dad, I have 3 daughters. I always think about, my parents never asked me to see my report card. Like, I can't even imagine that, Actually, I had one of my daughters, I stopped looking for another reason. But I never was asked to do homework. Like we were competing. It was almost like there was, and I'd say there was an expectation, but not really, My folks did value education. As I said, both were PhDs. So they both actually, I guess we appreciated that by osmosis. But it's a family of entrepreneurs. And so that was different. So, my dad, since I guess when I was 6, started his own company. He's a dean of students at a local college, Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh, and then started his own team building company. And so, as young as I can remember, I was collating books from my dad on teamwork and team building and leadership, which is funny to think about now. And then my mom operated 2 schools, one for kids with special needs and one kind of a matriculated school. I guess it was more like a charter school that you would think of today. And then my mom and dad partnered up, and my mom became the star of what became a consulting business, where they ended up consulting with Xerox and ADP and Texaco around the world. So pretty fun business, and a great as a 13-year-old seeing your mother up in front of a room, and back then, come mid 80s, you're talking, it's all white males. It's a sales manager's session, and she is just wowing the room back and forth, making them laugh, making them cry, teaching them lessons. And I remember my mom had made me go see her. I must have been acting up. I don't remember what I did, but I was a tough kid, the toughest of the 5 in terms of their parenting and what they had to deal with. But I remember they tried everything. And back then it was like they took out sugar. They sent me to my room. They would try and take away anything. But I remember watching her and thinking, like, I want to do that someday. And so I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. And whatever, we just competed, and sports was our release, and it was a way to connect with my dad and my mom and each other. And it was pretty special.
So I wonder, how old were you when you experienced that transition from, food stamps to country club? How old were your siblings? And as a byproduct of that sort of change, and this is something I'm very curious about, because my dad is also a PhD. He happens to be a professor. How did the career advice that each of your siblings got contrast based on where your parents were at in terms of their life circumstances?
All right. So this is a classic Catholic family. Like, we had 5 kids in 6 years. So, we were effectively the same age growing up. I was the second born, but most loved, or at least that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. And I was on food stamps, I think, until age 3. My folks started making money when I was about 13 or 14. So just hitting high school, end of junior high school. And then lost it all when I was in college. So, and what was the second part of your question? How
I guess, how did that affect the advice that your parents gave you and your siblings? Because you're also close together. Maybe it's very similar. The reason I asked that is because I saw what happened when, my dad and, like my sister and I are 5 years apart, and my dad was building his career. My parents didn't have a lot of money. And so my sister and I have these wildly different experiences growing up. Like, I shared a bedroom with my sister until I was in the 9th grade. Like, I didn't even have my own bedroom.
Yeah.
And then she got a very different experience. She got to do a lot of things at high school. My parents just had more money.
Yeah, I love that. We actually, there were 4 of us. We had 2 bunk beds in a 9x9 bedroom until I was 12. And then I had my own room. So it was like, it was like almost overnight. We went from that to a tennis court and a pool in our backyard. Like, that's how stark it was. Like, it was bizarre. And yeah, my younger brother and sister definitely had it better in those years, but then they got hit harder at the end because they were still in the house. So yeah. Yes, they got some, and in terms of lessons, like, I've got one daughter about to get ready, taking SATs and ACTs and trying to figure out where she's going to school. I never had a conversation with my parents about where I was applying to college. And as far as career advice, I remember after I graduated from Villanova, I was bouncing at a bar called the Princeton in Avalon, New Jersey. And my mom set up an interview for me that I was not prepared to go on with ADP. And it was a total disastrous story. My car broke down on the way from the shore back. I borrowed my friend's clothes because I left my clothes in the car that broke down. And I end up in his Suzuki Samurai, which didn't have doors or a roof. And so I walked into this interview with clothes for someone the size of Andre the Giant and hair looking like Don King. And this guy is saying, like, you're not ready for this interview. You're not prepared. Anyone that would work here would have been at Nordstrom and I said, hey, it's 9:00. It was 3 a.m. I was hitchhiking back here. This is a great story. And the guy's name was Paul Bugley. And I stayed in touch with him for until he passed away about 5 years ago. And, I had a disastrous interview, my first interview. And that was my mom's biggest client. So how do you think that phone call went? So I ducked her for 2 days as I was back at the shore, and it didn't go particularly well. And my mom was she's the most wonderful, compassionate, lovely, supportive mom. I'd never heard her that nasty ever. And that was like, what a great lesson though to get, right? So, get prepared. Like, I don't walk into meetings without being prepared now. I don't, anybody that walks in like that with me, I would throw them out as well, but man, and that kind of shook me back into real life. Like, I went back to the shore and it just wasn't the same. I was playing hoop twice a day. I was working at a bar. I was going out all the time. And literally 2 weeks later, I just moved back to my parents' house and I said, like, hey, it's time to get on with this and get a gig. And my dad was the only career advice I've ever gotten from my dad, which was, he said, I walked downstairs. They had their, an office downstairs, and I walked downstairs. I said, okay, what's up? And he said, well, what's your plan, son? I said, I don't know, Dad. What do you think I should do? He said, I want you to go upstairs. I want you to write down 20 places you want to work. So I went upstairs, came back an hour later. I said, okay, here they are. He's like, okay, now you've got to get to somebody at each of those places. And this is before the internet. Like, there's no, I'm like, but how? He said, you know enough people, start making phone calls. And that was the best advice I got from my dad. And the second was when I got hired at Madison Square Garden. I was president of Madison Square Garden, and he grew up in Bayside, Queens, and he grew up, there were 6 of them, 6 siblings. They all stayed in the same bed every night. Okay. So he didn't come from a lot of means. And so, I grew up in upstate New York. And so working at Madison Square Garden, the Knicks, the Rangers was like dream come true. And I called him. I said, hey, Dad. And he said, son, even you can't fall off of this floor. So I thought that was good too. So no, he was like, he loved, he coached me from when I could walk in basketball, and was always a huge supporter, but I didn't get like counseling like you have today. And there wasn't access to information. And so we kind of stumbled through it.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
Sound plays a much bigger role in our lives than most of us even are aware of. An EPOS podcast powered by audio tells stories behind the sounds we hear every day, sounds that inform, entertain, educate, get our attention, influence our behavior, and save our lives. Randy Zuckerberg and her guests explore how audio shapes our experience and how pioneers are creating the sound of the future. You know all those sounds from your devices when you're using apps or receiving text messages or anything else online? Well, it turns out somebody actually has a job doing that. Randy talks to the experts behind these sounds to find out about the work that goes into designing what she calls those sonic logos. As a podcast host, I think a lot about how sound impacts us, whether we're hearing it on a podcast or from a notification on a phone or from some app we're using. And if you want to learn more about the impact that sound has on our lives, listen and subscribe to EPOS's Powered by Audio on Acast, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, Indian parents have the sort of doctor, lawyer, or engineer. We jokingly say the Indian parent motivational speech is you can be any kind of doctor, lawyer, or engineer you want to be. But the thing that I wonder about is, CEO of an NBA team is not something that is, you're going to find in a high school guidance counselor's recommendations of, okay, this is what you need to do to get that job. It's not a linear trajectory. So I'm curious, like most of the people that I've interviewed who have interest in careers, what was the path to getting there? I mean, It sounds like there's all this stuff. There has to have been all this stuff in between.
Oh, for sure, and a lot of bumps along the way. I will say, like, 3 of my brothers are running companies right now. So we were definitely trained to be running companies in some way. I don't think it was by design, but that's how we grew up, thinking that we were going to do whatever we wanted. Can you imagine waking up every day and your dad telling you, you are incredible. You can do anything you put your mind to. There is no ceiling in what you can accomplish. Only you will decide limits of what you can accomplish. Can you imagine? That's how I grew up.
Wow.
Every single day. And so I believed it. I'm like, after a while, like, yeah, that's true. I can. Maybe my mom used to say, you should be an astronaut. I was like, of course, but that's how we were taught to dream big. Although my folks were relatively parochial. And so, yeah, the journey was fascinating. I got hired as a marketing assistant. I was making $15,000 a year, living with 7 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, and I couldn't even afford lunch. I was living in Hoboken, New Jersey, and no vacation, no benefits, no overtime. And I spent my days fetching coffee and picking up dry cleaning and doing crap work. And I spent my nights picking up projects from the other departments and being fascinated by the business. I love sport. Like if you look for, everybody needs a kind of find some stillness in their life. And for me, if you just bounce a basketball in the gym, it could be 5-year-old girls or NBA players. It's my piece. Like that is my Zen piece. With the business though, that's not what I love about it. What I love about it is you have this incredible platform. And I recognized it literally on my first day. You have this platform that brings people together and unifies. And if you fast forward to today, boy, what a great healing tool in terms of a divided nation on so many fronts. This is the one area of life that brings people together and has them act like children. We scream, we root, we cheer. I was at a game last night, losing my mind in a game, standing up, cheering, clapping, shouting. And it's like, because you're part of that family, part of that community. But anyway, going back to my story, I was working for this legendary guy at the time named John Spolstra. whose son now coaches the Miami Heat, Eric.
Yep. I was going to ask you. I was wondering about that.
And so Eric and I are about the same age. So I knew him when he was playing, and he played college basketball, and just a wonderful, wonderful guy and an extraordinary coach. But his dad was kind of the it guy in the sports marketing world. And the Nets were a B brand at best, maybe a C brand. And he decided to hire 50 some odd 22-year-olds and figure it out. And I got promoted from an assistant to a sales job because I was in on a Saturday fixing a copier. And you think about like, yes. And he's like, what's your name again, kid? You know, what do you do here, kid? Can you come in my office, kid? You know, and when I went in there, he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to sell sponsorships. He's like, congratulations, you've just been promoted. Now I'm 22 years old. And he's like, take that office over there. And then he would take 5 of us out once a week for dinner and drinks. And you think about like the president of a team. And again, I always think about lessons and how they impact and influence who you are and how, you know, and when I spend time with my 22-year-old reps now, I want them to know who I am because I knew who John was and he knew who I was. And that was important. But that was my first big promotion, if you will. I mean, it's so funny to think back on it. And I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I mean, they had these old SIC books, which effectively big red thick books, probably 6 inches thick. And they listed every company in the country. And I would just call them one by one. I mean, not exactly target marketing as we know these days. But anyway, and then I had an internship at Advantage International, which was a sports marketing firm in college. And the guy who was my boss there suggested I call the Jeffrey Lurie, who had just bought the Philadelphia Eagles for a then record price of $188 million. Which was insane. Like they literally said, "It's crazy. What is he doing?" And it's now obviously worth multiple billions. And I cold called him about 50 times. And he's I wasn't a good salesman, but I could get anybody on the phone and carry on a conversation. And I did with his assistant. She knew who I was. I would call her every day. I said, Anna, I'm going to call you every single day for the rest of your life until you let me in to see him. And so about the 50th call, she put me on to Joe Banner, who's now a dear friend, who ended up being the president of the Eagles for a very long time, is now since retired, who hired me. So, and then I was the director of sales there. I was 24 years old, a director in the NFL. I couldn't direct myself to the bathroom and back. And I was like learning how to write a budget and write a business plan, and had this incredible new boss come in, Len Komorowski, who's now has been the CEO of the Cleveland Cavaliers for the last 15 years or so, who taught me, how to be an executive. And then I left there for Harvard Business School, which was an insane and wonderful experience. There aren't too many kids from Our Lady of Lourdes High School going to Harvard Business School. Let's put it that way. And that was special. I mean, talk about learning how to dream big. I was around people who were smarter, more driven, had better experience. And I loved every bit of it. I've been a lifelong learner forever and loved learning. And that place I couldn't get enough of. People with big dreams and big ideas and wonderful. And an attitude where you walked in, you said, hey, we're going to help each other every day. Every freaking day, somebody from the administration or professor would say to us, hey, when someone from this class calls, you answer it and you help them. That's what we do here. And it became like, this is a family. We're not, again, going back to that, compete, don't compare. It's like, I could have worked 24 hours a day and I wouldn't have been I wouldn't have done as well as half the kids there. But that's not what it was about. It was about, let's figure out how to learn together and let's go take on the world together. And what a great lesson for companies, for teams, for colleges, for anybody. And I just love that mentality there. Then I came back and went back to the Eagles, which was probably my first mistake. I made plenty of mistakes, but that was probably my first mistake going back there because they thought I was the same kid who left, and I thought I should have been the CEO. And they were more right than I was. I was convinced I'd known everything. And, but that's what HBS is. That it's the study of how to make you a CEO. You're just not yet, And then I left. It was the .com boom era. So I left to start a startup called Hoops TV, with my dear friend Seth Berger, who had just he had founded And One, the sneaker company. If you know basketball, you might know And One, and I ran that into the ground. So I raised $15 million, some VCs, some strategics, and then I found myself out of luck, out of work, and out of money. And Seth, we were competing. We were the number 2 site behind NBA.com. So we had pretty regular interactions with David Stern, the former commissioner, and Adam Silver, the current commissioner. And so Seth called and said, "You need to see this guy," and they hired me that week. And that kind of catapulted my career. I was in a group called Team Marketing and Business Operations, and it was David Stern's vision to create the McKinsey of sports. And so we were a consulting outfit that worked for the NBA on behalf of the teams and building best practices. So I got a chance to work across 3 leagues, the NBA, WNBA, and now G League, and help everybody from the receptionist to the president operate a more efficient and effective business. And that was so much fun. And eventually I grew up there, and I ended up running the group, and then they gave me a couple other, the CRM group and NBA Canada, and then the G League. And so I started, if it was a problem and struggling, they handed it to me. I love fixing things. I love turnarounds, create culture. I used to say, kind of a bubble culture within the culture. And then I hit that age. I think I was 37 or 38, and I went to David Stern, who's since passed away, unfortunately, and said, "Hey, I'm ready to run something." And he said, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "Big turnaround, big city, big challenge, but I want to run it." And he said, "What about the Knicks?" And so 3 weeks later, I was named president of Madison Square Garden sports and running the Knicks and Rangers, Liberty, boxing, college basketball, and tennis. And it was incredible. We spun the company out from Cablevision and created a separately traded public company, and then put $1.2 billion into rebuilding it, the great transformation of Madison Square Garden, and then went out and paid for it and did these incredible deals, and was the kind of with the who's who of New York City, which is the center of the universe when it comes to business and commerce. So that was pretty wild, and went through 2 turnarounds on the court, which was fun. Knicks and Rangers both really struggling when I got there, and when I left, both consistent playoff teams. So pretty good. And then was fired from there, and that was a fascinating experience as well. Reading about yourself in the paper, I'd never had any like notoriety, if you will, like not, And that was the first time I was like wincing, saying like, I hope my kids don't read this,
I remember that in the book. I do want to ask you about that in more detail.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
It was a fascinating time. But again, I learned a ton. And then I met Josh Harris and David Blitzer, and they had a really struggling franchise in a big market that was acting like a small market, and they wanted to change the face of sports and entertainment and grow a global company. And I was all game. I wanted to be around people I love, like, and respect, and I love, like, and respect them. They're good people. They're incredible deal makers, and we've grown the business. We've grown it 5 times the size in the last 7 years, and then some. So that and on the court and on the ice, 2 really good stories as well. And we've had a lot of fun along the way. So it's been a journey to get from there to here. I've learned a ton of lessons along the way, but more importantly, I don't know. I feel like I have friends in every corner of the world, and more than anything else, that's what I cherish.
Wow. Okay, so many questions come from this, and we'll start getting into the book. Just one thing that I wonder, you had parents who instilled this very sort of, clear message that you could be, do, or have anything you wanted. And I had a mentor who worked with me for a really long time. And one thing that he always talked about and still talks about to this day, I'll have to send you that conversation because it's one of our best interviews ever. He talked about this difference between probability and possibility. And we used absurd examples, which I've cited before. So, for example, as a scrawny Indian person, the probability that I'm going to go head to head with LeBron James, even in a pickup game, is pretty much 0. And I'm pretty sure my parents never told me something like, you're going to be in the NBA because of that very thing. So I wonder, how you find that balance between, where do you draw the line between, delusional optimism and rational optimism, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah. Great question. Let me think about it. I would say that I don't look, I have physical limitations too. I wanted to play in the NBA, and I went to Villanova and tried out for the team, and Doug West was squaring off in one of the tryouts. And I was like, wow, this guy's 6'6", 220. He's faster, stronger, smarter, better shooter, better handle, better defensively. This is not going to happen for me. It was a great realization. But nonetheless, so physically, for sure. In business, I'm not so sure that's the case. I'm known from, if you had my executives with a bright light in their face, every one of them would say that I set unrealistically high expectations. And almost all of them would also tell you that we always hit them or exceed them. And I had this expression, like, why not us? Like, why not you? Why not me? Why not? Like, what is making the greats of the greats so great? Like, what is it? Is it the unwavering belief in who you are and what you can accomplish? Is it the willingness to fail and be okay and trying to innovate? Is it like a relentless pursuit of perfection? Is it like an unreasonably hard work ethic? Is it an understanding your priorities? I guess it's some combination of all that stuff, but in nowhere there, it's like the smartest people don't win. So you're not really saddled by your IQ, right? If you just work hard, that doesn't work. But I do have this sense that if you have the will, you're going to find a way. The challenge is a lot of us grow up in an environment where we don't know what's possible or what's big enough. I think that's the crime. So I guess I would, to answer your question, I would err on the unreasonable, whatever your expression was, enthusiasm or whatever. Like, I think that you should. I want people to stretch and grow, and I want them to take chances, and I want them to fail and fall and get up and try again. And I want them to be leaders, and that's what I'm trying to develop here. My whole life, I want to consider myself a leader of leaders. Everybody needs something to get them out of bed in the morning. And I've got two things. And one is, like, I hope to develop the next great generation of leaders in this business. And I want to leave the world better than I found it. And so, and those are two loaded things that any cynic in the world would be like, oh, of course, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, keep being cynical. I'm going to keep working. And I think that, I don't know, I wouldn't want to put a ceiling on anybody, especially kids. Like I have this, my older daughter, who's just this wonderful, wonderful, incredibly gifted soul with people, did awful in school. And I told you, like, my parents never looked at my report card. And I made a joke that, well, I don't with my one. My one was doing so badly her freshman year. And she came to me, she said, "You're putting so much pressure on me." I said, "Me? I don't care how you do in school." I said, "The only thing I give a crap about is how hard you work." I said, "That's the only thing that matters to me." And I think, my view on our education system for people like Alexa, who's my daughter's name, is like, she is not cut out to sit in a math class. Okay. It's never going to happen. And what happened to her, and by the way, she won national art awards. And I'm like, okay, let's feed the beast a little bit. I know you need a foundation in math, but do we really need to be taking calculus your junior year? Really? So now she goes off to college and she thinks she's not smart. I'm like, now that's a problem, because you can define smart in so many different ways. And so I don't know. I wouldn't, I guess I err on the side of, I want people to believe and dream, and then be cognizant enough to understand the kind of work that it takes to be successful. I have yet to meet a person in the world who is successful who hasn't worked their tail off.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want. That's what I want to see that from my kids. I want them to be hardworking. That's a core value of what we are. I always tell them, you weren't born with any gifts. Can't sing, you can't dance, can't write. You're not that good looking, But I said, but I do want them to have that hardcore work, and I do want them to believe they can take on the world. And by the way, that same daughter, she got a 3.8 last semester and read me her dean's list letter word for word. And I thought it was the cutest thing. Here's a kid who, it's like you could take all her GPAs from her entire high school and they wouldn't add it up to 3.8, And here she is so proud. And I'm like, good for you. You found your zone. You're in, because she's now at a point where she's taking classes in her major that she's passionate about and she's into it. And I'm like, good for you, kid. And I think I want more of those moments for everybody. I want people to be confident and walk through life confidently. And I think that's some of the secret sauce that's really, really hard to teach and harder to find.
Wow. Well, I think that makes a perfect segue to talking specifically about the book. What, of all the things you could do, I mean, you're a CEO of an NBA team. I'm sure you're a pretty busy guy. Like, why write a book? Like, what motivated you to want to do this?
Yeah, great question again. You're obviously pretty good at this. So my best friend in the world, Will Carden, took his own life a couple of years ago, and with shotgun. And he was suffering from depression, and he's got 5 amazing kids and this incredible wife and a successful guy, and could not get through it. Like, he could not beat the beast. And he fought it. He fought it for 15 years of hardcore depression, in and out of facilities, in and out of medication, all that kind of stuff. And I spoke at his funeral, and I grieved. I didn't even know what grief. I've never grieved before. I didn't know what grief was. And I couldn't focus. I'd be in a meeting and somebody would say something completely unrelated. I would just get out and walk out of the room and start crying. And so I was struggling and started to write as my own way to heal, and started to talk to friends of mine and ask them. And you just have this notion that everything is okay everywhere else. You see a picture on Instagram, or you see this holiday card that comes to your house. Like, wow, that family, boy, they have it all. Or, wow, that's amazing. Or that CEO, boy, how smooth and easy was that ride? Oh, he must be so lucky. And you look at life, and it's just not the way life works. Life is messy, And what I found when I was talking to my friends was they had stories that were as messy or more messy than mine. And it gave me peace and comfort in a strange, strange way. And so I started to write, and I had some of my friends write. And a good friend of mine, Randall Wright, said, you need to publish this. Like, this can actually help people. And he said, like, you're talking about leading leaders. You're talking about helping build the next generation. He's like, what if you can touch somebody? Like, what if you can make an impact? What if what you do actually makes a difference? And so I just went through the process. I hired a writer, Michelle Bender, who's amazing, because my agent, Jan Miller, said something really funny when I was talking to her. She said, "You're a book. This is not a book," which I thought was really, really funny and really humbling. And so she's like, "I like you. I like what's in there, but we got to get what's in there on here." So it was really funny. So I got real help, which was great. And then the folks at St. Martin's, Tim Bartlett, I think he's the best editor in the world, made sense out of it. And it allowed me in my voice to, again, I told you, I want to make a dent on the world a little bit. And hopefully this does.
Yeah. Well, let's get into this. I think it's funny because my absolute favorite parts of the book were the ones where you wrote about your daughter. And I want to start at the very beginning of this, because this raised a question for me, because you start out with this story of being, with your daughter at camp, and you say these 3 things to her that all of them really struck me. You said, friends are terrific, but they come and go in your life. Boyfriends are fleeting. Online connections are just that, but our family of 5 is forever. Love more, lean in, lean on, and cherish our bonds. Focus on how you can contribute as well as draw strengths from these connections. And then the other thing you tell her is, no matter what it is, how tough it gets or how deep you are in that valley, know that it will always be okay. You will always be okay. It will get better. The sun will come up the next day. You have to know that it will always be okay. And then third, you said, you can count on me. You can call me. You can text me, FaceTime me, and I'll be there. I'm here for you. I hope to be a sense of comfort, a reality check, a loving shoulder, a support system, and the person who you can call when you need to laugh or cry. I will listen. I will not judge. I will only love. You're never alone. I love you forever and a day. And I think the reason that I actually highlighted that, and it's the first question I chose to ask you about the book, is because I have a question that nobody has been able to answer for me, but given this relationship with your daughter, maybe you can. I've always wondered what it is, because my sister and my dad are incredibly tight. Like, she calls him every day. I hit a roadblock with him in about 15 minutes. I'm like, all right, Dad, I got to go. But for them, it's this bond where I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Meet Joe Black, but the older sister describes the younger sister as, when she walks into a room, your eyes light up. The entire mood of the room changes. And that is my dad and my sister in a nutshell. And just based on the way that you wrote about your daughter, I am wondering, what is it that leads to that kind of a bond, between fathers and daughters? Why is that so powerful?
I love that question. And I'm not going to be able to answer the question. I can tell you though, that there is such a special bond between fathers and daughters. And I have a very, very different relationship with each of my daughters. And each of them are very, very special in terms of the relationships. But my simple lesson is I try to meet them where they are. And I think dads have the ability to do that in a different way than moms do. Moms oftentimes play the disciplinary role, and oftentimes they play the operational role in the house. And so dads, at least traditionally, have been free. We're free to take the good stuff, if you will, to cuddle up when they're crying, instead of make them cry, to be a support system or a listen, somewhere to listen to them. But man, that relationship is it's as pure and special as you can possibly get. And I remember my wife saying to me, hey, you want to spend time with your kids? Oh, no, you want them to play basketball? Spend time with them. All they want to do is spend time with you. And I work 100 nights a year. I'm out early, out late. The pandemic's been like the best blessing for me ever. I'm home from family. I didn't even know what family dinner was for 25 years. And now I'm home all the time. It's fantastic. And so, but I am trying to get one-on-one time with them, whether that's driving them to basketball practice or sitting up and watching a 100, which I am with my 14-year-old daughter, some dark show on Netflix, which is fantastic. But I can't believe I'm watching it with my 14-year-old daughter. Or just chatting on the phone. My oldest is interning with the Utah Jazz right now, which is so cool. So we can actually talk about business. So I'm just finding them. I try to meet them where they are, and I love them no matter what. And they know that I love them. But boy, oh boy, that's such a good question. I have no idea what the answer is, but what a gift that it exists.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think those were the things that having a younger sister who has, this bond with my dad, those are the ones that struck me the most. In fact, you mentioned, you're not being home made me want to ask you about this. And I probably think this is my favorite quote from the entire book. You said, of the iconic sports franchises, NBA, NHL, esports, etc., under my supervision, there's no team I take more seriously than the Rocky Crushers, at least a 7th grade basketball team. I even skipped out on NBA All-Star Weekend in Chicago a day early so I could coach the team. You're the CEO of an NBA team, and that, yet your daughter's 7th grade basketball team is a bigger priority, which I appreciate that so much. That really touched me. That was my favorite line in the entire book. What's informed your philosophy of choosing to, prioritize your daughter's 7th grade basketball team over the NBA, where you're the CEO of the damn team?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. I do. I've coached my daughters now for 15 years, and until they get to high school, and then they're free to do their thing, either play or not play. But until then, they have a dad who will coach them. And so I'll bounce out of the office. I'll go late back to games. I'll do anything I can to make practice and make games with them. And we're never very good. It's never, I always say, get your friends. I want to know your friends. And so this is a way, can you imagine having as a dad, as your girls get older, you just don't have time. We wake up, there's chaos in the morning. I go to work, they go to school. They have after school sports or some activity. I get home, we rush through dinner, if I'm even home until midnight, and then they have homework. So how much time do you have? Do you get an hour a day? Do you get 2 hours a day? Do you get 3 hours a week of real time? And this kind of forces time. And I always say, I know my daughters if I know their friends. And so this was a way to get them together and spend quality time with them. And boy, I think sports are the best teacher, and in particular for girls. I think boys have had the competitive advantage for the last 100 years on youth sports, and girls are certainly catching up now. But what you learn to lead and to follow and to win and to lose and to sacrifice for others and to be a good teammate. and you understand what a bad teammate is because you see it, and you see people and you see their parents and how they interact awkwardly with the referees or the coaches. And as a kid, you're taking all this in, and it's formulating who you're going to be as a mom, and it's who you're going to be as an executive, and it's who you're going to be as a leader, and all this stuff. And I get to spend time with them every week being part of that and helping formulate those little things. And yes, we talk about what your favorite ice cream is and what your favorite place to go to vacation is, as much as we talk about switching from a zone to a man-to-man. We do. I will say, I always say, the first practice, we sit in the center of the court in a circle, and we talk and we get to know each other. And I will tell you, all my view of success always is how many of the young ladies come back and play the following year. And they almost always come back and play. And because I want them to love each other, I want them to fall in love with basketball. I want them to appreciate what competition means. And I could give a crap if you can drain an 18-foot jumper with somebody in your face. I actually don't care. But I do want to see you give your all every single possession, especially on defense. And everybody can give effort. And I love that. I love the lessons. The lessons are so applicable to life and family and relationships and how I go. I will say, I've had so many experiences like that. I remember coming home, and look, you need people in your life. I'm sure you have someone in your life that tells you the truth. Mm-hmm. And my daughters will tell me the truth. Sometimes it's not great. My wife always tells me the truth. I remember I was coming home one day. I think this is in the book. But I was coming home one day and we'd lost again. And I was in New York and all the teams were rebuilding. I was all grouchy and being difficult. My wife said, it's like, is this you really? And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, is this who you're going to be? I'm like, what? We just lost by 20 points. She's like, okay, so how many games are you going to lose this year? And I was like, I don't know, 100. It's like, okay, so 1 out of every 3 days, you're going to come home and be in a bad mood. She's like, this doesn't work for me. And I was like, okay. She's like, and it's not going to work for the girls. I was like, all right. So, and I was like, so she's like, yeah. It's like, and it walked away. And I was like, I got to figure this out. And so I only tell you that story because, sure, I have to figure it out. I have to then decompress and have my own systems to come in the house and be fresh and be clean. When you walk in that gym and you're coaching these gals, I better be fresh. I better be present. I better be where my feet are. 100%. I have to be there. And they know it, and they know what I am. And you have to meet them where they are, just like your kids. I remember in this practice, I had this one gal, cute little girl, and she was doing a little TikTok dance. And I was like, yo, hey, we're trying to learn an inbounds play. We haven't scored in 2 weeks, And she's doing TikTok. I was like, okay, you want to do a TikTok dance? So we did a TikTok dance together. Everyone made a video. And it was posted all over the World Wide Web for everyone to see. And because I'm meeting them where they are. I'm with them, and I'm their coach. And I'm there to coach them about boys or school or their mom or their dad or whatever. I'm there. And we all need people in our lives that are outside of our direct line to help us. And that's been a gift beyond measure.
Wow. So this is another question I had. You shared the experience, both with me and in the book about, going from being on food stamps to being extremely well off to being, poor again. And now I'd assume the CEO of an NBA team is fairly well compensated, which makes me wonder, having had that experience in your own life, how do you make sure your daughters don't overlook the fact that they're, growing up in relatively privileged circumstances compared to most people? Because I'm guessing many of the players on your teams probably came from far worse backgrounds than your daughters do. And so how do you instill that sense of, humility in them to make them understand that, hey, this is not normal?
Yes, no, it's definitely not normal. And I remind them of that. And I'm very fortunate. Like my wife, I remember in sports, it's step function increases in pay. Like you don't make a lot of money and then all of a sudden you get a big step function and you're like, wow, this is a good living. And then it step functions up. And I remember I was at the NBA and I was making a good living by anybody's standards. And my boss had left to go run the Hawks and the Thrashers in Atlanta. And I'd been given an indication by the commissioner that I was going to be his replacement. And I said to my wife, I was like, I think I'm going to get a promotion and I think I'm going to get a raise. She's like, that's awesome. I was like, yeah, that was it. And then I went to work and I'm sitting with David Stern and Adam Silver, and he was a really tough guy. He's very abrupt and nasty and cursed and threatened and all that kind of stuff. And so he was like promoting me, but yelling at me at the same time, which was kind of awesome. And he says like, and do you know how much you're going to make? And I was like, no. He's like, do you have any other questions? I was like, yeah. And I wanted to hire a couple people, and he said, fine. And then he says, he's continuing to give me a tough time. And he said, well, what are you asking for? And I was just like, whatever you think is fair, and I walked out of the room. And so he called me later that afternoon and told me what I'd be making, which was about double what I was making the time before, which was still for me at the time, like more money than I ever thought I'd make in my life. Okay. So here I am in this cool job, living the dream. I have a great family. I'm happily married. Life's good, and then I get this, promotion and pay raise. And I went home to my wife and I said, Lisa, I got a raise. I'm going to be making X. And she looks me dead in the eye and she's like, can you imagine all the people we can help? And I thought, definitely married the right woman. Yeah. And it's such, to me, like the most powerfully intense moment where you understand that my kids are going to be fine. They have a really grounded house. Like we get up on Saturday and we do chores. We go serve people who need to be served. They understand what their obligation is. And they also understand that this is not theirs. And I tell them that all the time. This is not, you haven't earned anything, And so I think the kids are grounded, and I know that they understand that they're blessed. They also understand what the world looks like. I've had a daughter serve in an orphanage in Zambia, and sleep on a dirt floor in a tent, a little Barbie doll out in the middle of the bush, sleeping in a tent. I've had a daughter work in a Syrian refugee camp in Athens, which she described as, and I quote, Dad, extremely dangerous, but not as bad as the subway to my hostel. I have, oh boy, I'm not going down as Dad of the Year. I have a daughter this year. We're going together to Zambia to build a school. I'm sorry, not Zambia, Zimbabwe, to build a school. And so for us, I think our girls kind of get it. And look, I don't want to come off as like I'm the perfect dad or everything's great and everything's perfect. I struggle. Okay, my girls struggle. My wife, we struggle. Like we are the classic American family. We do the best we can with what we have. We love each other a lot. We understand the power of family. We understand the blessings we have. We try to give more than we take. And but yeah, we talk about this stuff a lot as a family. And I feel like Lisa's the big anchor on that one.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
This episode of The Unmistakable Creative is supported by RemoteWorks, a podcast that tells extraordinary stories of teams that made the shift to flexible working. If there's anything that last year taught us, it's that the way we work has changed forever. And in each episode of RemoteWorks, host Melanie Green tells an insightful story about how people and companies are adapting. She talks about the very problems that all of us are dealing with. Last season, in Preventing Burnout, people learned about the challenges and rewards of working remotely during the pandemic. Now, I don't know about you, but I have definitely felt that there are days when I am burned out, and sometimes I don't even know when I am done working because it's all I do. A recent study found that 75% of workers have experienced burnout, and 40% said their burnout was a direct result of the pandemic. But what if we don't know the signs of impending burnout? You'll hear firsthand from someone who has been through burnout, as well as get expert advice on how to recognize it and what you can do to prevent it from happening. In this season, RemoteWorks explores several other topics related to the new world of work, For those of you who are baseball fans that are missing those days of eating overpriced hot dogs and drinking oversized beers, they pull back the curtain at Major League Baseball for a glimpse of how America's most beloved pastime is working remotely. You'll hear how the MLB has had to adjust just about everything that they do, from new rules about how we gather to virtual fans in stadium. You'll get to look at how they've embraced this new world of flexible work. I recently listened to the Burnout episode of the Remote Works podcast, and here's what I thought. Melanie does an amazing job bringing in diverse perspectives from experts and people who are dealing with the issues these experts are trying to solve. It's basically a combination of great storytelling with practical advice that you can apply to your life or your work. So search for Remote Works anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks to Remote Works for their support. So have you ever downloaded a file to your computer and drove yourself insane trying to find it? It's a bit like tearing your whole house apart to find your keys, only to realize they were in your pocket, except you never actually find the files. I don't know about you, but this not only drives me crazy, but it causes me to waste a ton of time. No matter how many Dropbox folders you set up or how you organize your files, somehow the system just falls apart. You kill your productivity just looking for stuff. So a few weeks ago, I learned about a new tool that helps you organize everything in one place and find the content you need 10 times faster. It's called Charlie.ai, and it automates your ability to organize files and find them. And now I use it for everything, from storing invoices to contracts, and I can find whatever I'm looking for in seconds. And in the spirit of transparency, I love this product so much that I asked the marketing director at Charlie if she'd bring me on as an advisor. Charlie.ai is like a real-life assistant for your content, but with the power of AI. And you can try it for free at charlie.ai/podcast. Again, that's Charlie, spelled CHARLI.ai/podcast.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to my specific NBA related questions. Like I said, I'm the weirdo who plays sports video games religiously, but couldn't tell you most of what's going on in any major sport at any given time. Like I'm surprisingly knowledgeable about the NBA only because 2K commentary basically is like an encyclopedia of random facts that you get to hear while you're playing the game. But one of the things that you said in the book is that being at the top comes with pressure, along with the assumption that the best player on the field already has all the answers, will be perfect in his shots and passes, and will score the game-winning goal with no time on the clock, i.e. robotic perfection. Star athletes internalize these demands and often form cold, hard walls and barriers between themselves and their teammates, coaches, and loved ones. And one thing I wonder, so I've had a NFL player who was here, and one of the things I asked him was, why does somebody like Tom Brady become Tom Brady? And the rest of the people in the NFL, most of them, we don't even know who they are. Like I couldn't tell you any single name of a defensive lineman or a tackle on any team because they're pretty anonymous in the grand scheme of things. And I very distinctly remember that scene from Any Given Sunday where Lawrence Taylor is talking to Jamie Foxx and he mentions all these star athletes. He's like, for every one of them, there's a million people you never heard of. And so I wonder, you've been part of a team, and I guess the example I'll use is Iverson, because he's the one who drives me crazy on 2K since I can't seem to slow him down. What I wonder is, why does somebody like Allen Iverson end up in his circumstances, and how do you get an Allen Iverson with this insane talent, and then how do you get a Michael Jordan who has wildly different life outcomes? Like, what causes that?
I'm not sure. They grew up in very different circumstances. Allen was, born to a 15-year-old single mom in Hampton Roads, Virginia, in a really difficult time, and then, ended up in a really awful racial incident where he would argue, maybe many might, unjustly put in jail. So his life experience was really hard, and people in that community wrapped their arms around him and saved him, if you will. And one of those saviors became John Thompson, who was a former coach of Georgetown University, who brought him in. But Allen, there are a lot of things that people don't know about him. I happen to know him fairly well and love him. I love him for the person he is and the person he aspires to be. He was taking care of 38 families. 38 families at his peak. And you know why he was taking care of them? Because they took care of him. And I love that. And I wish some of the decisions he made were different. And I'm sure he wishes that as well. But boy, oh boy, here's a person who wears his heart on his sleeve. He takes care of those he loves. He is as passionate as anyone you'll ever meet. and appreciative of the moment in time that he had. And that is very different from Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan grew up in a nice family and had a really good lifestyle growing up, and played at, UNC, and was drafted 3rd overall, and life got good. And they both have that. I'll tell you what they have in common. They both have like an insatiable appetite to compete and a crazy drive to win. And to be an elite person at any level, I think you have to make trade-offs. And I think that's the case in business, or in your faith, or in the community, or as an athlete. Is like life is about trade-offs, and they both made different trade-offs for different reasons at different times and got different outcomes. I don't think either of them would trade what they did or how they did it. And that's what I appreciate about both of them. I will say that being an athlete, I'm not one, as you know, but being around a lot of them, it's hard. And I wouldn't aspire now, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't aspire to being a pro athlete. It's too hard. You don't know. It's very, very difficult in terms of who to trust. Relationships are somewhat fleeting. And, you peak by the time you're 28. And, I look at Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett made 98% of his wealth after the time he was 65. That's a good way to peak too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's a hard life they live. I agree with the 1 in a million, one and a million you don't. It might be 10 million you don't, or 20 million, or 100 million you don't. But I think that lifestyle is really, really hard.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a perfect segue to the next question I had. I think those of us who are on the outside, we look at, sort of watching these star athletes, and we think they live these incredibly glamorous lives. They're all well off. After reading Andre Iguodala's biography, and then there was another book that was written by a sports journalist called $40 Million Slaves. And they both talked, explicitly about race in the NBA, which I'm curious, how all of that has affected you guys, and what impact all of, the Black Lives Matter movement has had on both the league and individual athletes. But I think one of the things I distinctly remember was the Jeremy Lin documentary, where he had mentioned, it was an interview he did on a podcast where he said, the fantasy and the reality are really different. He's like, it's a high paid job, but it's a job just like any other job. And your ass is on the line every single night. And there's always the possibility you're going to lose their job. So 2 questions come from that. One is, what's the difference between the fantasy people have about this life and the reality? And, what is it that enables these guys to perform at the level that they do, and do it, night after night after night?
Yeah, the first part is the only thing we see is the gladiator moment. Like, that's the only thing we see. We see them walk on the court as fans and be cheered or booed. And what we don't see is the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of work on their bodies, work on what they eat, how they take care of themselves, working on their craft. Like, we don't see it. I see it, by the way. It's unbelievable how hard they work. I think the elite guys, they have a drive. They have all the physical tools. They have all the mental tools, and they have an insatiable appetite to compete. And so you have those 3 things are what happens when and they stay healthy. So, but I wish people could really see how hard Joel Embiid works, or Ben Simmons works, or Jack Hughes works, or Nico Hischier works. I mean, this is a total, complete commitment. And think about what you're giving up. You're giving up any sort of private life, right? Anything you do, you go out to a restaurant, you're getting photographed and put on TMZ. Anyone you date is public fodder. Any mistake you make, or you think about the last time you were frustrated at work, or you said the wrong thing to a friend, or you had a bad breakup, like, you don't want that on ESPN, on SportsCenter. And they have it. And it's hard. It is really, 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 really hard. But I like I said, I don't envy the lifestyle. I admire them. And I do, what I am a little bit maniacal about is And what I talk to them about is making sure that they're protecting themselves financially too. So they have to figure out who to trust in their life, and they've got to save their money. And when your peak economic windfall is between 20 and 28. I mean, think about yourself when you were 20 years old. Like, could you have handled making $5 million a year?
No, if I had that much money, I would have absolutely squandered it. And, when you said that, it reminded me of this podcast that Charles Barkley was on with Dr. Phil. And I don't remember which player it was. It was a younger player on the team with him. And no, somebody had scolded him. It was one of the older guys on the team because he bought something like 2 or 3 cars, right when he started playing. And the older guy was like, "You're an idiot. What are you doing?" And he said, "This is actually one of the reasons a lot of these guys make all this money, but they end up leaving broke because they're just caught up in the lifestyle."
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about that. There are a lot that end up that way. The problem is they're young and they have time. And those are two bad things. And if I were 20 years old and you gave me $5 million a year, I wouldn't understand taxes, of course. I wouldn't have understood like that this is going to end ever, of course, because I was immortal when I was 20. I wasn't thinking about retirement. Now these guys come in, they're smart, they're brands. It's different. Especially the elite guys, the Ben Simmons, the Joel Embiids, they have a complete understanding of their brands and how they manage their money, and they have people around them. And that's great. So for the elite guys, they're most of them are in really good hands. It's the guys that come in and for anyone else, making $1 million a year should be enough. You do that 5 years in a row and you should be good to go. As I say, wealth is not about what you earn, it's about what you save. And so, our counsel is to save 50% of their salaries and get them to a financial advisor before it hits their check. And then they can go have fun with whatever else they make. And in many cases, they'll never know the difference. And then they'll wake up when they're 30 and 40 and 50 and have plenty of money for the rest of their lives and their family's life, but you get in that, but it's hard. It's hard. You've got people tugging on you left and right. You're not sure who to trust. Everybody has an idea. Everybody wants to be your friend. There's a ton of pressure, but I think the Players Union has been great, at least the NBA and NHL in terms of education. And I've seen a huge movement from when I came into this league in the early 90s to now in terms of players, them managing their brands, managing their money, managing relationships. It's a whole other world. It's been great progress. More to go, of course, but good progress.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because the question I had next was sort of about the contrast, sort of pre-internet, pre-social media versus now. Because one of the things you say is, in a world dominated by instant gratification and obsessed by the spotlight of now, trust the process is a commitment. You'll keep a long-term view at the forefront of your planning and decision making. This has implications far beyond basketball. And the reason that struck me in particular was because you now have a world, particularly for these young athletes, right, who basically grew up watching people that you've worked with, like, they saw the early 90s and they've come into a world with Instagram and Twitter and all this stuff that they didn't have before. Like, effectively, like you said, they're their own brand. And Cal Newport, who was a guest here, who wrote a book called Digital Minimalism, another one called Deep Work, had, done some work with NBA teams. And one of the things that he told me that I just found, really interesting was he said when people tweeted the night before the game, their performance actually suffered. And so I wonder, one, what's been the contrast from, pre-internet when you see these guys come in to now? And how do they not, sort of lose their sense of drive or get caught up in all this instant gratification?
It's, I'm not sure it's instant gratification that's the issue. I think that there's so much negative pressure out in the world to stand out that people, we have 7.5 billion media members now, and the way they get attention is to be critical. And I go back to my 20-year-old self. And what if I got 5,000 in my era? I guess it would have been handwritten notes, but now it's tweets saying how terrible I was, how awful I was, that I couldn't shoot, I couldn't pass, should be traded, suck, I'm the worst person of all time, don't belong in a city. Like, that's what's happening. And so now you're 20 years old and you have 5,000 people and you read every single one of them because you're 20 and you can't help yourself. Yeah. And having had a little bit of hate tweets come my way, I will tell you, like, as a much older, much more mature, much more secure person, just because of my age and experience, it hit me and hurt me. And I always think about like, okay, if fans only knew the impact that they were having when they were nasty with these kids, and that's what they are when they come in the league. I know they grow into men, but at 20 years old, you're still a kid. I think it's really, really difficult. And I couldn't imagine when I say how difficult it is to be a star, I think it's hard. And I think if fans ever knew the impact that it's their virtual boo, what that has on players and their psyches. And we've seen it. We've seen players come out and talk about the mental illness they've had or the mental fragility they've had playing in this league. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media. And we're seeing that in our teens too. So, forget about athletes. It's happening in junior high. Like levels of depression are up, levels of anxiety are up. Like, where do you think that's coming from? Like that is I need to be perfect. I need to be first. I need to be liked. I need to have everything go well, or reading something that doesn't feel good, or you're feeling like you're excluded. Well, that like, welcome to real life. And I think they're in a fishbowl, and I think it's a very, very, very difficult thing. And if I had a son and he was playing in the NBA or a daughter playing the WNBA, I'd tell him to shut it down. Just shut down social media and go have some fun. Be you, be present, be where your feet are, and let's go.
It's funny you say that.
It's that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'll send you the article. Cal Newport wrote an article on his blog about Bryce Harper, the baseball player. And I don't know anything about baseball, but I just remember this article very distinctly because he said, Bryce Harper doesn't use social media, and he apparently landed a $430 million contract. And I was like, that's the upside of not using social media that much. I think that, that's a pretty strong case.
Right. Yeah, we have some of our players now that if you ask them, like, we have some that are building big brands on social media, and that's wonderful too. And others that don't have an interest to it and actually have someone doing it for them. So they're not saddled with it. So they're not saddled with someone saying, you can't shoot, you can't jump, you can't guard, or whatever it is. But it's like, it's too much. And it's not like nicely said. It is a bastion of hate that doesn't belong in this world.
Totally. Yeah, it's funny because we have certain players that we struggle with on 2K. For some reason, me and my roommate really cannot get Chris Paul to shoot 3-pointers. And I'm like, wait a minute, Chris Paul is a lights out 3-point shooter. It's like, maybe we should tweet him and ask him, like, is there a reason we're not able to make threes with you on 2K? Like, maybe you'll have an answer. But this is a question out of morbid curiosity. So my ongoing joke is always that the only reason I'd ever need $1 billion is to buy an NBA team. And one of my mentors said, okay, tell me something. Like, what would buying an NBA team do for you? Like, what will that actually give you? And I was like, courtside seats. He was like, you don't need $1 billion for that. I'm sure you can find an easy, cheaper way. But with that in mind, like the people who you report to, I'm guessing your bosses are the owners of the team. What actually enables somebody to get to a level where they can buy an NBA team?
Yeah. First of all, I hate the word owner. It's just a pet peeve of mine just because it has such negative connotations when you're talking about people. So I always use managing general partners or managing partners for whatever it's worth. But yes, they're both private equity guys, Josh Harris and David Blitzer, both self-made. One was at one of the co-founders of Apollo, Josh Harris, and one is one of the early guys at Blackstone. They are considered some of the greatest deal makers in the world. And private equity has been a really good business, apparently, over the last 20 or 30 years. So yeah, so they came in before the Steve Ballmer purchase of the Clippers for over $2 billion, which really catapulted the prices. So they got in at a really, at least by today's standards, a really reasonable number, and have done really well with the business. But yeah, no, it's you have to have a B in front of your wealth to be a control partner in one of these businesses now. But boy, what a room. Like you walk into I've been in the NBA boardroom now for 18 years, and I've been in the NHL one for 12 years. And I mean, it's everyone you'd want to be or do business with, from Ted Leonsis to Mark Cuban to Jim Dolan to Joe Lacob. I mean, these are the Steve Ballmer titans of industry, Dan Gilbert. I mean, you have like the who's who of the country in a room, and they're your partners. And so that's and there's scarcity. There are only 30 teams. And I think that drives a lot of the value.
Totally. Well, it's funny because I remember even Mark Cuban said in an interview with Chase Jarvis on Creative Live, he said, you can become a millionaire through hard work. He said, becoming a billionaire involves a bit of luck.
Yeah, Mark is very humble. He happened to got to know him fairly well over the years. And I mean, he's brilliant. And so he would always say, when people would give him a hard time when he was first in the league, he's like, yeah, no, I know I was just lucky. Like, that guy's never been lucky in his life. He is brilliant and hardworking and passionate and compassionate and has an incredible eye for brand. And he's has the best PR mind on issues of anyone I've ever met in my life. But I appreciate what he's saying. And there's a degree of luck that happens to all of us. But there's also people who make their luck. And he seems to be one of those guys, if you want to couch it as lucky, he's a guy who's made a lot of luck for himself. And I don't think it's an accident. And look, would I have loved for my father to be a billionaire and pass me down money? Yes, I would have. He died broke, unfortunately. But however, if he did and he passed me $1 billion, I would buy an NBA team for sure, or an NHL. I love them all. I'd take either of these sports. I really do love them. And I think, and it is fun. And you should tell your mentor, or whoever told you that you can buy courtside seats, it's much better than that. You were on the inside of something so special and spectacular, and you're around the greatest athletes and performers in the world. And you have this incredible platform to get out and do good and drive change in the community. I tell you what, it is wonderful.
Yeah, that's literally my sort of, crazy, ridiculous out there goal is to basically own an NBA team.
I like that. You can hire me, by the way. Love to do it.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, you'll be my first call. If I ever in the position to be like, to actually buy a team, I'll be like, oh, Scott, I'm ready. So actually so I have a couple more questions for you and then we'll wrap things up. So one thing I wonder is I feel like there's also lessons here for life. What goes into a turnaround? It's like you get something. Remember, as I was telling you before we hit record, when I was in college, the Warriors were the worst team in the NBA to the point where, you could buy season tickets for $60 on a tear out sheet at the Berkeley campus. In fact, our season tickets for Cal's football team were more expensive than season tickets for the Warriors at that time. So how does a turnaround like that happen? And then, what happens when you have, an organization like the Spurs where they've just had dominance for so long? And because I feel like every NBA team goes through turnaround periods. So how do you, bring this turnaround about? And then how do you handle those transition years, those rebuilding years?
Yes. I think in many cases, turnarounds, there is a formula. I'll try to articulate it. One is you have to be realistic about where you are when you walk in. And you truly have to get a real assessment of where you are. And then you have to have a really clear picture of where you're going. And then you have to be willing to make the tough choices to get there. And that formula will take place in the form of people. Do we have the right people in the right places? That will take place. And do we have a culture that is inspiring, one of accountability, one of challenging, and one will keep our best talent here and going? And that's, players and otherwise. And do we have the resources to get us there? And then there's the great arbitrage, which very few people ever talk about, and that's patience. And that goes with life, that goes with business, and it goes with sports. Can you imagine if you said 5 years from now, I want to be able to speak Mandarin, or I would like to understand financial accounting, or I would like to have 2 million followers on my podcast, or I would like to write another book, or I would like to, whatever that is. Like, can you imagine if you just took a 5-year view and you said, okay, now I understand where I am and I understand where I'm going. Now, what tough choices do I have to make to get there? You're going to have to sacrifice and give some things up. You're going to have to. But can you imagine if you got incrementally better every day towards that goal and you said, okay, I'm going to give an hour a day towards that? How much better would we be? But we don't, because we live in this world. Talk about instant gratification. We want it right now. We want everything now. And this is not the way that you find sustainable success. And you find sustainable success over time. People who are great, what they say, overnight success takes about 18 years. Maybe not now if you want to be a YouTube star, but I don't have an interest in being a YouTube star. I want to I want to create something meaningful. And like I said, whether that's an organization or a family or driving change in a community. It takes a plan, the right people, time, and patience.
Wow. Well, hopefully I'll get to come and sit courtside with you at some point.
I would absolutely, as soon as this world opens up, come see me. We'll have some fun.
I will absolutely take you up on that offer, despite being the weirdo who never even watches sports. Like I said, I've watched NBA games.
2K team too, because I'll have you scrim with our 2K team. You won't believe how good these guys are.
Oh, well, that's like a guaranteed loss for me. It's like when you play those kids online. We always tease my roommate, who basically, he basically jokingly in our household refers to himself as the NBA god. I'm like, you know what? Go play some 13-year-old kid online, and we'll find out how good you really are. Because I'd done that once, and you look at their records, and we're like, 3 or 4 games here and there. Each of these kids has like 10,000 games under their belt, and you're like,
insane.
And in 10 minutes they're up by like 30 points.
That's insane. So fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So I have 2 final questions for you. Has your definition of success and what it means to be wealthy changed over the course of your career and with age?
Yes, considerably. I just read this incredible book called The Psychology of Money. If you haven't read it, you should pick it up and read it. It's brilliant.
On my list. Yeah, it's on my Amazon list.
Is it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
It talks about a couple things. One is not moving the goalposts. And another thing it talks about is when is enough enough? So sure, when it comes to financial security, having gone through what I went through with my folks, I'm definitely on the more conservative side in terms of saving. So that's been good. But what I'd have to call it a day, if you will, or feel comfortable, continues to increase over time. And that may be a natural fact. I wish it weren't true, but it is.
Yeah.
And that's something that is evolving for me. But I'm way too blessed. Like I said, I don't have many material needs. My wife doesn't have many material needs. So our view of success is very different. It's, can we live comfortably? Can we not have to worry about money in the future? And there's some number for everybody that can do that. And then can we help those we love along the way? And we've both been helped along the way. And oftentimes for some people, it might be helping them with an education, or other people, it might be helping them with a car that's broken down, or another people, it might be buying them a car or helping them with some little things. And we typically stay close to those we love and are close to us, and who are less fortunate financially. They might be way more fortunate in other areas of their life. They may have a great spiritual center, and they may have a wonderfully peaceful family, and they might be like thrilled and happy working a 9-to-5 job. And that's a gift in a different way. I don't have that gift. I have this insatiable appetite to grow, and the only thing that upsets me is status quo. And that can be, I'm sure you know this. I know we're reeling towards the end, and I don't want to throw a bombshell in, but the older I get, the more I sense that our best strengths are also our Achilles heel, and vice versa. Mm. And so if you're a slave to saving, that might be, that's not great for you, right? You might miss opportunities to create experiences for you and your family. So there's this whole notion of, if you're this, rah-rah leader, that's not me, but if you're a rah-rah leader, that might be great, but also might grind some people out, so I don't know. I just keep the notion of sometimes you should think about that as it might relate to you, like your strengths and your Achilles heel and how related they are.
Wow. So I know I've kept you here well over our time, so I want to be mindful of that. So I have 2 final questions for you. One we didn't quite get to, but I'm wondering what the impact of race relations has been, particularly in the wake of Black Lives Matter and everything we've seen in the NBA. Because I know we've seen things like players basically not playing the first quarter and stuff like that. I mean, if I remember correctly, for you guys, like on the management side, how has all of this affected your relationships with players? And vice versa?
Sure. Well, first off, what a gift. What a gift to have a platform that is meaningful enough to drive change. And that's not something I ever overlook. Secondly, I've been building diverse teams for my career. And when I came here to the Sixers, I used to joke and it used to make everybody uncomfortable. They would all look down and I would say, hey, it's great news. We have such a diverse team. We have old white men and young white men. And everybody would shake their heads. And then I started putting processes in place to change that. And, half of our final candidates had to be diverse candidates. And then over time, it never happens overnight, but over time, you look forward now, we had one person of color director above, and we had one woman VP or above. And you look forward now, and 26% of our staff is African American. And we've got 9 women who are SVPs or above, including our COO, our CRO, and our 2 chief marketing officers and our head of HR. And you're thinking like, okay, we were making progress. So when I mean kind of the great white awakening, as I call it, when it came and hit America finally, I wasn't embarrassed. I'm proud of what we are as an organization. I'm proud of the diversity we have. And I'm very well aware that the NBA, 75% of the league is Black, and I know that our staff has to reflect America. And so, and when friends of mine called me scrambling, I said to all of them, I was like, hey, brace yourself. Like hiring a chief diversity officer, it's a nice step, but about 5 years too late, but it's definitely that old adage, it's the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago, second best time right now, for sure. Yeah. And I just kept saying it's a high risk time for white males running companies for sure. And you know what? It should be. And we have an obligation because we can do better and we should do better. And to do it, you're going to have to work harder. And you're going to have to recruit harder, and you're going to have to recruit smarter, and you're going to have a long lens, and you're going to have to take some chances. And you got to get out of that notion that, hey, I'm going to hire the guy I worked with the last time, every time, because that's what's happening. Because we're more comfortable hiring people that look like us. We just are, and that's okay. And what I love is the next generation is much better. The generation of my kids is even better. And my generation is better than my parents and is better than their grandparents. I just wish the rate of change were faster. And we work, I'm fortunate we have, Doc Rivers is our coach and Elton Brand's our general manager, 2 African Americans who are incredible advocates. They are incredible leaders and they're inspiring. And they're inspiring not only to me and our team at work, but also to the community at large in the world. And we need more smart, talented people out there ringing the bell that it's not okay. And so I feel like it's been a blessing. The NBA and Adam Silver's incredible leadership on this issue has been fantastic. And let's hope this is the start, because this isn't something that goes away. This is something that we spend time, we focus on, and hopefully can be a platform to accentuate all the good that's happening in the world. And we're doing cool stuff too. We set up a Buy Black program where we highlight 5 minority-owned businesses in the Devils community in Newark and in Philadelphia with the 76ers. We've increased our vendor spending to have a minimum vendor spend, which has been an unbelievable education for me. We've invested in our first real estate project in a community of need, a predominantly African-American community in Philadelphia. And I think that's the first of many. And we're working on some incredible programs. Is it enough? No, it's not. Can it be more? Of course it can. Do we like to be an example to others? We do. And this is a place I'm not ashamed or afraid to be first. And I'm not afraid or ashamed to trip and fall. And sometimes I don't say all the right things, and sometimes I don't do all the right things as a leader. But my heart is in the right place. My intentions are in the right place. And this is an organization that cares. And it's diverse, it's inclusive. And we look forward to hopefully being a leader and considered a leader for a long time.
Wow. This has been absolutely incredible. So I have one final question for you, which is how we finish all of our interviews at the Unmistakable Creative. What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
I want people to be unmistakable by being their authentic self. I used to have this T-shirt. It said, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. And I wish more people lived like that. I mean, it's okay to search and to have a mentor and a teacher, and it's okay to have a role model. But the truly unmistakable people are authentically themselves.
Amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us and share your story, your wisdom, and your insights with our listeners. This has just been wonderful and funny and eye-opening and insightful. Where can people find out more about you, your work, the book, and everything that you're up to, other than going to a 76ers game?
We'd love to see you at a 76ers. You're definitely coming to a Sixers game.
Oh, I will absolutely take you up on that. I wouldn't miss that for the world.
You can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, of course. But most importantly, I would love for you to go to an indie bookshop near you, because small businesses are struggling right now and they need your help. So if you're going to buy this book, and I would appreciate it in advance, take care of that local bookstore that can need you. And you can find them online wherever you are. And keep listening to this podcast, because I am, because it's a wonderful reminder of things that really matter. So thank you, Trini.
Thank you very much. And for everybody listening, we will wrap the show with that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast. While you were listening, were there any moments you found fascinating, inspiring, instructive, maybe even heartwarming? Can you think of anyone, a friend or a family member who would appreciate this moment? If so, take a second and share today's episode with that one person, because good ideas and messages are meant to be shared.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.